Welcome to the Innovative Revenue Leader podcast. I'm your host, Seth Mars. Join me as we deliver practical insights to help B2B CROs find new and innovative ways to grow in this fast-changing environment. The Innovative Revenue Leader is sponsored by Sandler, a Trilliad company, empowering sales professionals and leaders to master the craft of selling at all levels. Today, I'm speaking with someone I've had on the show before, and I'm thrilled to have him on again. He's always writing cool stuff, so I'm always trying to pull to get him back on the show to talk about it. He's a sales ops transformer, revenue engine architect, and a key thought leader around revenue technology. He's led global sales operations and enablement across enterprise software environments, brings a rigor to planning, analytics, and compensation design that is hugely valuable to his customers, and is very passionate about helping sales ops teams escape the tactical vortex aligning sales, marketing, customer operations to build a truly strategic revenue engine. He's currently a principal analyst at Forrester. Anthony McPartlin, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Beth. Thanks for having me back.
So we, in kind of the reformat that we're doing, we ask the same question to every guest to start off the show. So I'm going to ask this one to you. What's the most innovative thing you've seen in B2B right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of experimentation going on across some of the customers that we talk to, a lot of the customers that we talk to. In terms of ones that I think are seeing real impact, I think roleplay is demonstrating real impact for organizations, because I think, you know, a lot of the enterprise customers that we speak to, getting your sellers comfortable, ready, confident to talk about new messaging, new products, you know, across different personas, it's a huge challenge. And I think AI roleplay is giving organizations, giving enablement teams, giving RevOps teams a way to make that happen consistently and at scale. Right, because the traditional ways of doing that were not really scalable or feasible, right, in terms of kind of role play or offline training and kind of recording. That stuff just, you know, sellers hated doing it. Whereas role play, I think the feedback from sellers has been really positive across the companies that I've spoken to. You know, with the use of different tools and how quick it is for them to be able to spin up different role play scenarios to meet the different types of sales scenarios that they're involved in, right? Whether it's different personas, different levels in the organization, different product scenarios, or different sales scenarios in terms of new acquisitions, upsells, cross sells. So to me, I think, you know, it's probably at this point, it doesn't sound hugely innovative because role play is available now broadly, but it's the ability to embed it into the seller's workflow to make it part of their day, so that before they get on calls, before they go to meetings, there's an opportunity for them to, you know, kind of try out something before they actually have to go and do it in person. And that just wasn't possible before.
No, or it was hugely time consuming, right? Because you have a person that had to be with you to do it. Nobody likes doing that type of stuff. So you get to do that stuff on your own.
Yeah, it was artificial, right? It was biased because eventually or inevitably they're putting you up against a sales leader or an exec leader, God forbid, right? And, you know, they have a perspective of how things should be sold or what you should say. And, you know, for newer sellers, that's pretty intimidating. Right. And, you know, I think this gives people an opportunity to get comfortable with their message, to get comfortable with their kind of verbal tics, physical tics in a setting like that, so that when they do get in front of prospects or customers, they do feel a lot more comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, that's a kind of a thanks for the layup on that one, because we're right in the center of that, obviously, as Sandler, like building that stuff out. We work with Udly on it and working with like other partners. It's really easy to do at a general level, and it's fairly good. It's also going to be interesting to see, right? I don't know if you know, but like you probably do, but I think today or tomorrow, Gong's releasing Trainer, which is their role play. So it's eventually going to be a ubiquitous part of a revenue orchestration.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think you'll see, as you say, role play becoming just a standard aspect of revenue orchestration. It's one of those areas where you've got definite overlap between revenue enablement platforms and revenue orchestration. And I think, before we get to the end of the year, you'll see that role play capability in most of the major platforms.
Yeah, for sure. So I had you come back on because there's been a few things going on in sales tech. Like you had Claude dropped cowork, and then all of a sudden it's the end of SaaS as we know it, and the world's on fire. And I'm sure your phone was ringing off the hook, going, okay, with RevOps leaders going, okay, what do I do now? Do I cancel all my SaaS subscriptions and then just buy Claude? And like, is it over? Like, how do I deal with this stuff? And you wrote a post on this or a blog around it. You want to just like talk through at a high level and like what you covered there and kind of your perspective on it, because you're seeing it from a bunch of different lenses. And I'm sure you got the wave of people asking for your advice once all this started to come out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think obviously we saw in February, and obviously there's been a lot of other kind of talk and chat, but when you see, the guts of $2 trillion wiped off stock values, SaaS stock values in February, it raises some big questions. And I think what it raised was a perspective amongst investors that, the assumption that rising tide, floats all boats is maybe not that true anymore. And, obviously the question is if you need less heads, and you're trying to sell software on a per seat basis, well, then, there appears to be a clear problem there. And in terms of the business model around some of the SaaS companies. And I think that's true, but I don't think it's necessarily news to SaaS. I think SaaS companies have been aware of that, right? And they're all trying to figure out what the path to a new revenue model or a hybrid revenue model looks like. So do I think the rev tech stack is exploding? No, I don't, but I do think it has to evolve. And I think the next, 12 to 18, 24 months are going to be messy from a pricing perspective, because you've got that tension, right? You've got the SaaS companies looking for new pricing models to experiment with, but dealing with kind of, the customer issues attached to that, because yes, SaaS is expensive. SaaS, it locks you into a certain cost amount, but it's highly predictable versus kind of flexibility, but unpredictability of cost, right? And so I think a lot of customers are not really fully clear around what their strategy is around AI cost governance in particular, right? And I think it's a really interesting topic as AI becomes more embedded in revenue tech stacks. Who owns the governance of that cost? I don't think really clear. Like, is that a RevOps responsibility now, or does it have a co-responsibility for that? Because I think what a lot of people would say, and you and I've talked about this, if the pricing model is more focused around usage, well, then RevOps surely has to have a fairly significant role in metering and governing that usage pattern. Otherwise, costs will get out of control.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting because like you could argue that it's RevOps will manage all the agents in a sales team, and there will be agents that will act that way. And it is so true. I mean, we were talking about this, like nobody knows what the hell the one thing that we know for sure is the seat pricing model will not be the core pricing model in the future. That's going to have to change. Investors will force that with SaaS companies. There'll still be seat, but like the interesting part that it'll have to split out into something, because, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, like the LLM costs it's a tax that's being added to you. That is a very significant tax. And it's also a core part of the value of your tool. So you have to change that model. It's like, to a large extent, when I looked at this happening, this is all financial maneuvering. seems almost like a boon for RevOps. It's like, this is your moment. Like, go figure this stuff out, because now you're going to be able to put pressure on your vendors. You're going to be able to push for a lot of different things. You're going to have different options. Like, if you're an innovative, like really like forward-looking RevOps leader right now, you have more tools than ever to be able to do all sorts of stuff on your own that you either needed a seller or IT or somebody to do. It just seems like a cool moment for RevOps, scary moment for SaaS companies, but a really like a rise up type thing for RevOps.
Yeah, like I think in the blog I was talking about the fact that you see these kind of overly simplistic narratives, doing the rounds in the media. One being AI is replacing all the jobs, and that's kind of the narrative that the investors are kind of leaning into. Versus, oh no, AI is just about augmenting sales. But the story I was trying to tell in the blog was that I think it's more complex than that. I think the impact of AI is kind of uneven in that its impacts on sales in particular, they vary fairly significant depending on the segment that you're in, the sales motion, the complexity of the deal, right? So, highly transactional sales model, you can see where AI has not only the potential, but is having an impact on, how those types of motions are run, versus a highly complex one where clearly there are limits as to, how you can deploy AI to engage customers, right? But I think that's not the only implication. The other part of it as well is around, I think people see, well, if we deploy AI, the kind of the impact is kind of linear. In other words, headcount out, margin up, simple. And I don't necessarily think that's the case, right? And I think this is where kind of to what you've just been talking about, the challenge for RevOps is actually, I think, potentially going to get more intense from a financial perspective, right? Because AI, it shifts your cost curves, but I don't necessarily think it flattens them. And so I think you get, for example, you get things like productivity gains, but you're resetting expectations in the organization as well at the same time, right? So there is going to be pressure for things like higher quotas, fewer coverage buffers, right? Tighter forecasting tolerance, right, in the organization. So I think, if you're framing it purely as kind of AI equals fewer sellers, fewer ops roles, then you're kind of you're misleading yourself and others, right? Because I think for RevOps, it's more economic accountability, it's more governance responsibility in terms of the systems, in terms of the core processes that are being enabled by AI. And I think potentially there is the opportunity for more cross-functional tension, bizarrely, as a result of that.
I think so too, because this stuff will be pulled into other different groups, whether you want it to or not. The thing that your talk around it being uneven, I think really resonated with me, because that's the part that everybody just ignores. And I think that's vendor led, right? The vendors just tell you it's easy and they just go do it. But the reality is there's a messy middle here. And when you're trying to implement this stuff, you can implement it in one place and then it breaks somewhere else. And then you have to implement it somewhere else. And you talked about the change management side. When thinking about, like, how are you talking to people about that? Because I don't think people are talking about that component. And then if you're an ops leader, you're going in, or a sales leader, and you're implementing this stuff, and you have this ripple effect that creates all these other problems. And then your leaders are saying, well, why isn't this working? Why can't you do it faster? And the reality is I'm doing it at one level and it creates another one, and all these things are moving around. How do you guide with that? Like, because that's such a problem that nobody really wants to hear, but it's very much a reality.
No, I think, at the heart of it is the fact that I think for a lot of organizations, they've been use case led, and that drives a very kind of ad hoc approach, ad hoc mentality to what is a much more significant transformation and change management effort. So, what we've been trying to, help and encourage our clients to do is to think about what their AI strategy is in sales and go to market. And if you're thinking about it through that lens, then you're not only focused on, well, where can we deploy this and how can we show the benefit, but you're also thinking about what does the long term, like what does AI look like in sales 2 years from now? What's the impact on our resources? How do we position that with our frontline employees, with our executives? How do we set expectations? How does it change the training that we do, the enablement that we do? How does it change how we measure performance in the organization? Like, what does it do to productivity, right? So if AI assists reps, but it does that unevenly, then what does that do? Does that impact how you kind of traditionally benchmark or measure seller performance, right? If so that's something that those types of downstream implications, I don't think people have thought through sufficiently. And our view on that was, look, if you can start to think about this as a more long-term comprehensive approach, these things start to get flushed out and you can start to think about, okay, in 18 months time, we're going to have to think about how this changes things like how we define territories, how we do compensation, how we bring on sellers, how we continue to train these AIs in more, demanding use cases. So I think, we're kind of at the early stage there.
The thing that's been going through because you have all these people talking about all these roles going away, and we know roles are going to go away or change for sure, but go away, who knows? But like, to me, it's the more interesting subject, or what are the roles that are going to be created? And to me, like, when I think of a revenue architect, like the person that you would hire in, like right now you've got the go-to-market engineer that's basically embedded by Clay to go in and help you generate demand. So using all these AI tools, to me, what you've just been talking about is you need someone to manage the unevenness. You need an architect that can go in and harness all of these agents and then deploy them effectively across the business. It seems like that should be something people are talking about, but nobody is. Instead, it's just all about the tech instead of all about, let's get a person that can become our expert and drive these agents throughout our business. That seems like a role for the future that, to your point, would allow you to be strategic, would allow you to understand the unevenness and really make it work.
Like, I think, if you think about it, I think RevOps is on the hook for making sure that key processes like forecasting, become so much tighter, because the tolerance for that inaccuracy just won't be there. So we're going to have as well much more pressure on system precision, systems getting things right, not just across forecasting, but in other areas. The kind of things that we've tolerated in regards to CRM issues, schema, modifications, configurations. Those things are not just a hygiene issue in a world where everything is being run through AI workflows. It's a kind of critical dependency, right? Things will break. Automation will break in that. And so how does RevOps support that now? What kind of roles do you need to be able to ensure that the automations that you've invested all this time and money into and that you've replaced headcount potentially in order to make happen can run smoothly and consistently? And that's a very different type of profile and responsibility than what RevOps was originally intended for.
Yeah, it's a rethink, right? Like, and I think that's the same thing with sales. Like, in a world where I have not a tool to work for me, but a tool that will work with me, you've got to reconstruct how your full go-to-market engine is set up. Same thing with RevOps, right? We shouldn't, everyone's looking at their tools. I have an SPM tool, I have a forecasting tool, I have an orchestration tool, I have an enablement tool. And you can almost see the people that are assigned. In this world, all that will be sandwiched together, and there's going to be new roles that need to be created that would really, like, if you thought about it, to your point, like if you took a 2-year look forward, I bet you would or a lot of organizations would reassess and reassign roles in ways that would be much more advantageous than the standard stuff that we're seeing today.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting area for maybe us to look at from a research perspective in terms of, taking a look at how those roles are, the roles that you have in RevOps are likely to change, what new ones are likely to come in. And we've kind of, I think, to be honest, avoided some of that because we've been waiting for some of the dust to settle or to get a maybe stronger glimpse as to what are some of the kind of key priorities that we think are likely to be part of a RevOps responsibility, 12, 18, 24 months from now. But I think that's starting to kind of appear.
Before I move on this, I want to double click on something that you talked about before, because I think this is at the center of everything we're seeing. Like at the most, and I wanted to get your take on, at the most simple level with all the stuff happening with SaaS, this is token costs. Like this is at the end of the day, there are foundational models that can do things that nobody else can do, and there are only a few of them. So every SaaS provider that is not one of those foundational models will pay that tax to the LLM. For years, I mean, you and I were talking to vendors about this, and they were saying, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's cheap. It's not going to be expensive, blah, 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 blah." It is very clear that it is expensive, that it is something that you have to take into account. And now you're going to be paying for at value. It's like the value, every piece of value you give to your customer that implements AI requires a foundation model. So the long and the short of it is that tax theme is the end of seat-based pricing, is what people talk about as the end of software, because no one else can do it. And it's just like you have to pay for data these days with cloud. You have to pay for energy, which is not expensive, but you're still paying for it. And now the most valuable part of your technology, or the future of all of your new capabilities, all the new capabilities these SaaS providers are putting out, is directly charged to a foundational model. So like that's at the end of the day, that it's a cost thing. These high margin SaaS companies that used to be at multiples that are super high are now basically going to be drawn into a place where they're functioning almost like a utility.
I think it depends, right? I think there's no doubt short term that SaaS vendors are facing some margin compression risks, right? But some are better positioned to face that than others, right? I mean, I think if you compare, there's a difference between a SaaS company that has increasing AI embedded into it versus a platform that's entirely built on top of LLM APIs, right? That's a very different economic profile. And so anytime the LLM pricing model changes, they are kind of tied to doing something about it because they've got no margin floor that they have from even base seeding model, right? And I think my feeling is that most of the SaaS companies will retain some level of base seeding plus hybrids for I think heavy usage of intense kind of inference is going to be a usage-based model. But if your entire business model is tied, predominantly to LLMs, what I think, so the question for me is this a transitional kind of tension or compression, or is it there for the longer term? Like, if, you could look and argue maybe, are we in a similar position to what we were with cloud in that we're seeing LLM costs are reducing, right? So I think as well, SaaS providers are looking at, okay, which models do we use when, how do we optimize our architecture so that, we can really optimize for our AI costs. But there's no doubt that, it is going to impact margins. I think the question will be to what extent. To me, it feels like, I think the larger companies, they'll still have attractive margins. I still feel that way, but I think they will be changing how they price. But I think the interesting thing is how they get to a new pricing model is going to be a rocky road, and we're seeing that already, right? We're seeing that Salesforce have been trying all these different sales pricing approaches to the, unfortunately to the confusion of their customer base, right?
It's always been pretty bad, but this is nuts. Like they have like 8 different ways to price the same product, but they're floundering like everybody else to figure out how do you price this.
Yeah, but it's at least it's honest, right? In terms of that, it's clear that they don't have the answers. They're trying to figure out how do you do what's right for Salesforce, and at the same time is acceptable and is attractive to buyers of technology. And I don't think anybody's figured that out yet. And so I think that journey is we're nowhere near the end of that journey, I think.
Yeah, I think that the interesting thing, like as you talk to this, is it's the same type thing with. I think it sometimes when you look at investors, they operate in a world where this is how it's going to be. Like you have the smartest people in the world working at these SaaS companies. You can bet that they are going to pivot and look for new ways of value, and they will find new ways to add value that didn't exist before. Like they know they can't exist in this model, so it'll happen. It'll be in this year. I think you're going to see even more. Like some of this stuff will start to warm a lot.
I mean, I think, yeah, proprietary data, right? Use of things like NCP, which is more efficient. And I think, how deep their ecosystem is. And I think at the same time, from the larger LLM providers, there's a lot of competition there now as well, right? And I think, LLM APIs there's a certain level of commoditization that will happen there as well. So to me, it feels like that there's a rough patch ahead, but I think that there's the potential for some equilibrium there for SaaS companies. But again, I think, obviously, the challenge will be, I think personally, for AI startups who are built entirely on AI LLMs, what's the opportunity for them to scale in the same way that SaaS companies benefited from, where they had that operating leverage, that it gave them that runway to build a business? I think that's a really, I think a serious concern.
Okay, I'm going to pivot us to some stuff where we talk about you a little bit. I didn't get to do this the last time that you're on, so I'm looking forward to this. So, when little Anthony was running around the fields of Ireland, did he ever think?
That's what Gen X did back then. Said Gen Xers could do that. You can't do that anymore. Run wild, right? Yeah. Well, my mother kicked me out of the house at a certain time every day, and I wasn't allowed back in until 6 p.m.
As you were out there dreaming of the world to be, do you ever say, like, I hope I'm a Serious Decisions like I want to be a research director at Serious Decisions when I grow up?
I was saying, I think I'm a sad disappointment to my 5-year-old self. I had grand notions as a child. I saw myself winning Wimbledon multiple times, right? And so I thought a career in professional tennis was just inevitable, right? It was just a kind of a straightforward thing, right? I had the gear, I had the sweatbands, so it was just I just had to keep showing up. Unfortunately, it didn't work out like that, and so then progressively I would kind of attach myself to some other unrealistic aspiration, rock star,
Musician.
yeah. So I'm doing the best I can. I'm clinging on for some dignity from my 5-year-old self.
Yeah, I think you've done pretty well. Pretty well. So, like, fast forward. Now you're graduating from college, and if you could give that person some advice based on what you know today, what advice would you give them?
I was fortunate that I think this dawned on me relatively early in my career, was that I think when you finish college, you have to accept the fact that there is, particularly in a lot of the areas that unless you're in a career for life type job like doctors or whatever, that really your job is to assemble a set of skills that you enjoy being, utilizing and developing, and that the application of those can be done in a range of different roles. And so my kind of approach to work and to my career was about assembling those things, those experiences, and doing even to the cost of like I should have stayed in certain companies from a stock and share perspective, right? But I left because I was bored, right? I felt like there wasn't the opportunity to learn new skills, to get new experiences. And, to me, if I was, I guess I have these types of conversations now with my 19-year-old son and my 23-year-old daughter, trying to figure out, what are the steps for them. And there is, especially in today's environment, like, you think about how things have changed. Thinking about your career in terms of these shorter spans of role types and building certain skill sets and getting experience, and then staying open-minded and curious around how could I deploy these things? How could I leverage these skills and experiences in other areas? So that flexibility, that curiosity, I think is really key.
Yeah, it seems to be even more important, right? Same thing with my daughter. Like, how do you need skills? It's a skill more than anything.
Yeah. And a mindset, right? It's a mindset of, that a willingness to kind of put yourself into uncomfortable situations. Like, you talk about that scenario, and maybe Irish people are kind of famous for a little bit of, you know, fake it till you make it, right? Get your feet under the desk. Okay, the feet are moving at 90 miles an hour, but the show is all it. Keep everybody kind of, you know, feeling like that you do know what you're talking about until you do. And certainly that's been true for my entire career, especially when I arrived at Forrester and people said, "No, you're an analyst now." I'm like, okay,
Yeah, what does that mean?
what does that mean, right? And you're going from being a practitioner to somebody who people are looking to for guidance. And the imposter syndrome is massive, right? And it is, that continues to be the case, even for Forrester analysts who are here 20 years, right? Where, that's just, and that's good, because it means you stay humble, you stay focused on learning things every day, and taking learnings and experience from guidance that you have with clients, because they teach you so much.
Yeah, that's what makes you a great analyst, though, is you don't let that become it turns into ego where you think but the best analysts are the ones that are constantly like, I curious, trying to figure out, don't think they know, like that, for sure.
Yeah, there is no simple answers for a lot of, the enterprise customers that we deal with, right? You can't show up and say, well, here's the recipe. You have to listen really deeply to what's going on, because a lot of times it's cultural, it's context, and it's, what you recommended for one client just won't work in another.
So where can people find you, Anthony? If they wanted to follow you, hear more from you.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. That's really my main. I'm not a social media guy beyond LinkedIn, to be honest.
Well, so great having you on again. Look forward to having you on in the future. Thanks a lot, Anthony. Talk to you soon. And that wraps up another episode. Thank you for joining. For show notes and other episodes, visit us at innovativerevenueleader.ai. The Innovative Revenue Leader is sponsored by Sandler, a Trilliad company. Sandler provides top corporate sales and business development training while empowering sales professionals and leaders to master the craft of selling at all levels.